It should be recording now. Okay, so once again, for people that are just coming in, thank you for joining us for the Pause Program Summer School. This is our first class for the season of 2026, and I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Dan since we're 2 minutes out already. Go ahead, Dan.
All right, well, evening, everybody. We'll jump right in here. So the topic of today's conversation here will be about shaping. It's whether or not you know it or not. If you're doing any work with your dogs, you are actively working on some sort of shaping plan. Um, so first things I want to go through is just a few definitions so we're all on the same page of what some of these terms mean. Shaping is a training method where we build behavior by reinforcing small pieces of the target behavior until the full behavior is achieved. One of the tools we use in shaping is called successive approximations. And this is where we take small, very incremental steps um, through our shaping process. Each step gets closer and closer to the final behavior, and only the more advanced versions of the behavior are reinforced over time. So think teaching a stay. We don't start at a 2 hour stay. We teach stationary behavior, then a 1 second stay, then a 2 second stay, then a 3 second stay, so on and so forth. A marker. So a marker is a signal used to indicate to a dog that it has performed a desired behavior and that a reward is coming. Markers help us capture a specific picture to tell the dog, yes, that is exactly what we like to see. And that makes it easier for the dog to understand what we want and helps the learning process. Most of you who have worked with me or seen any of our videos, you've likely heard people saying the word yes. It is a very common marker that we use through a lot of our training. Luring. Luring is using foods, rewards, or some sort of targeting behavior to facilitate movement, right? So using something that the dog will move for, to get them moving into various physical positions. Typically, things we use a treat. We can lure a dog to walk forward. We can lure a dog into a sit, into a down. We can lure a dog to a variety of things. Capturing. Capturing is a process for reinforcing the behavior when the dog naturally offers it. So this is a little bit different than, say, intentional training in the sense that you're living with your dog, you're working on down, they lay down because they're tired, and we mark and reward for the down, making down a more common behavior. Prompting, on the other hand, is any additional help we give to encourage that behavior. So we can use body movement, leash guidance, pointing, verbal encouragement to encourage them to move towards a specific behavior. The cue is the name or signal that we give to the behavior itself. So verbal cues might be the word sit, or for a hand signal, that kind of palm up motion that we use to kind of give each other a sit. There can even be environmental cues. Some people, people use a sidewalk as a cue to stop walking until release, so that way we're not walking into the road. And the last term is engagement. And so that's going to be used in the sense of measuring the dog's willingness to interact, focus, or participate in an activity. And in this case, mostly in engaging with our people, because the foundation of any training is the dog's willingness to work with us. So anytime we're interacting with our dogs, I like to kind of remind everybody that there are things we have to prioritize for the overall welfare and health of our dogs. So before we jump into any training, the very first thing we have to do is look at their kind of primary needs. Are they safe? Are they secure? Have we given them the appropriate opportunity to meet their physical, mental, social, sensory, and food needs? Have they had all the necessary engagement that they need to enjoy working with us, to feel safe, to enjoy life before we build in kind of the second half of the prioritization ladder, which is where instead of just brief engagement, can they stay engaged with us for a longer period of time? If we can't get past the check-in, it's hard to work on longer behaviors. Then we can jump into things like basic cues, lure following, catching treats, tossing treats, sits and downs, and then we move into our advanced cues. Things like stay, place, drop it, leave it, loose leash walking. We always want to make sure that we have the lower level, more intentional welfare-based things to take care of first before we teach higher level things. So let's jump into shaping. So we're going to teach a dog any new behavior. We're going to go through a variety of steps. The very first thing is, have we met this dog's needs? Really hard to ask a dog to learn if they have unmet physical, emotional, and mental needs. So, very first thing we take a look at is, have we given them a chance to get their physical outlets done? So I'll use loose leash walking as an example here. It's very common when I work with folks who are working on loose leash walking that it is their first exercise of the day. Well, for some dogs, after a nighttime worth of sleep, they are just a amped up tornado, right? And ask them to control all that energy on a leash is really hard. So instead, we give them a chance to run, to play, to tug, to burn off that energy before we go for the walk. Mental stimulation. Walks are part of that. Exploration is part of that. Novelty is a part of that. Sensory, giving dogs a chance to sniff, explore, mark, etc. And then the last two, social and food. We aren't starving our dogs to work on training. We're making sure that they're eating at normal routines, normal times, feeling well, and that the food meets those overall needs. So the goal is really to put the dog in a state where learning is possible. If we don't meet these things, it's very likely that the dog is not going to be interested in learning from us. All right. Next part of any training process should look at the environmental setup. Not all environments are conducive to teaching a behavior. Uh, how you set up that environment will impact what the dog does. So whether or not we have water, food, or toys available, whether or not we have space, the right textures, the right temperatures available to facilitate learning, whether or not the environment is way too active. If we're working on loose leash walking, we probably don't want, when we're just getting started, a whole lot of friends or dogs or people or activity. We want to keep it nice and simple to support that. And then do we have any necessary gear to support our training? Can we move to softer surfaces? Do we need elevated surfaces? Do we need agility equipment, targets, leashes, harnesses, etc.? It's going to have a huge impact on our training for the day. Um, and I'll use Kat as an example. She's got a dog named Scooby. She was working on trying to figure out how to do a warm up with Scooby. Driveway was too hard. She picked a different location. Warm up was much more successful, led to a much better training session for her. All right, rewards. This one tends to be oversimplified for a lot of folks because we tend to pull out food, and I love food. It works majority of the time, but food is not the only option that we want to have here. And finding the right type of food can make a big difference. And it's not necessarily what we think is high value, it's what the dogs think is high value. So we want to look at whether or not we have food rewards. We can also look at toy rewards, and we want to experiment with the different hardnesses, textures, meat types, non-meat types to figure out, hey, what will the dog work for? And like I said, I like to remind everybody, the dogs are not obligated to like or work for what we have. Um, for own dogs, this tends to be not to be as much of a problem because we can just transition to something else. But if we walk into a shelter, if you're anything like me, I'm bringing one, two, maybe a third type of food. And if the dogs don't like it, I'm out of luck that day, or I need to go restock to find something else that they're willing to work for. The other half of rewarding is delivery. It's not always as simple as just handing your dog a treat. Sometimes it can be much more valuable to toss it so they can catch it, or toss it so they have to chase it or find it. So there's much more activity involved. Movement in that reward can be very valuable to some of the dogs. Pace of delivery. We want a calm dog, we can deliver slowly. If we want an excited dog, we can deliver quickly. If we need to have a really high rate of reinforcement, that can play a big role in that. And then where we reward the dog also makes a difference. If we're working on loose leash walking, we want to try to reward next to our side, not necessarily 10 feet in front of us. So the dog says, hey, look, being next to you is valuable. And these generally do take some practice. So that way you are proficient in rewarding in a variety of methods. All right. Engagement. First step of any shaping plan. Um, Building engagement starts by identifying the value of rewards. And then as we pull our dogs out and they're ready to engage, we look at rewarding proximity first. So, hey, I know we came out, but staying near us is a lot of fun. You don't have to just take off and go somewhere else. Once we get proximity, we build duration, and then we start to increase the difficulty of that proximity. So instead of standing still, we might start adding in hand and body movement. We might do some luring. We might do some food games or play with some toys. So that way we're building up the dog's skills of moving with us, staying with us, and staying focused despite the fact that there are other things happening in the environment. As you're working with your dog, it's always good to remember that choosing to do a behavior is something the dog should be allowed to consider. And so learning is a process from that standpoint, right? And so we always want to look at our foundations first. Recognizing the skills of the dogs in front of you helps you select appropriate behaviors. Some dogs who are very social, proximity engagement are really easy. For some dogs who are nervous or much more interested in the environment, those can be much harder. But the way we build through the learning process is we go from proximity to engagement to movement to simple cues to complex cues. If at any point we aren't able to get through one of those steps, progressing forward is just going to set us up for failure. So, for example, if I break place down, place requires engagement, it requires following a lure, it requires a marker, then sit, then down, and then being stationary. Loose leash walking requires engagement, proximity, a marker, understanding the concept of leash tension, understanding the concept of directional cues, and then the much larger concept of how do we behave in the social world? What is our socialization plan for dogs who might be overly enthusiastic or a little unsure of the rest of the world? All right, so how do we build behavior? Um, Remember, the goal is progress, not perfection. It's really easy to get caught up in what you want the dog to do to forget to reward the progress along the way. So the dogs are under no obligation to meet our expectations. They are our expectations. The dog is not an equal partner in setting those. We are helping them fit into our lives. So we want to make the process and interactions with us fun. So that way the dog is choosing to connect and engage. When we ask for too much, we'll see signs of frustration, which then leads to signs of disengagement, which can be very frustrating for a training plan. But that's something worth recognizing and worth taking a step back for. So we're not asking our dogs to push through that. Now, behavior is built on those successive approximations. So trial and error is very normal, and you're going to have to go through some of it to figure, hey, where is my starting point? And then from that starting point, we can then look at, hey, how do we set up stages to the behavior to reach our end goal? And I'll use stay as an example, right? So I may have a dog who is capable of staying for 5 seconds, might struggle for 10. So I'll start at 5 seconds, then go to 6, and then 7, and then 8, and then 9, and then 10. Now, along the way, when we're working through these things, it's important to not push yourself, you push your criteria too far, too fast. And that's why I want to introduce the concept of push, drop, stick to everybody. So each time you set an approximation for a behavior, you're going to want to repeat that behavior a minimum of 5 times. And if the dog does it 4 out of 5 or 5 out of 5 times, we can push on to the next criteria. If they only do it say 1 or 2 out of the 5 times, it's likely means that we asked for too much and we want to make the criteria easier. If they do it 3 out of 5 times, it means we're right in the middle zone. So we're not going to make it any harder, but we can probably avoid making it easier, and we'll repeat that criteria again and repeat that measurement. So for anyone who's struggling to potentially want to look at a unique example of how to kind of work through successive approximations. So very common when I'm in a shelter or watching people work, people take the behavior as sit and they think there's only one way to reward for a sit, and that's when that butt hits the ground. But for some dogs, that's really hard. And so we can break a sit down into 6 different stages, right? So the very first thing I'll look for if I've got a dog who's struggling is will they just stand still? while I'm in front of them. And then I'm going to reward them for moving their head any real direction, and shaping that into, hey, can I move my head up? Once I get the full head tilt up, kind of that nose pointing to the sky, I'm then going to start to reward for any knee movement in those hind legs. Does that butt go down at all? From there, I'll reward if they get half into a sit, and then I'll finally be able to get the full sit. But you'll notice a lot of times you'll see people say this, they'll just be saying sit over and over again. Very common to watch a dog back up, move in circles, work out of the way, because we're asking for way too much for them in that environment. So we need to build in some smaller, easier criteria so we can build that engagement and then build into the behavior. All right. Now, how do we set criteria as you move through a variety of these behaviors? So we establish criteria by finding the smallest approximation of our goal behavior. Like with a sit, start with stationary. And then we build that criteria in incremental values, ideally one criteria at a time. And an easy way to think about this is to consider the 3 Ds for our behavior: duration, distance, and difficulty. Duration and distance are pretty straightforward. Duration is just time. How long will they be in front of you? Distance is either how far are you away from the dog away from you, or the dog away from, say, a trigger. If we're working on, say, stranger danger, how far is the dog away from the stranger where it can remain calm? And then we can slowly work towards either longer durations or shorter distances. Difficulty is always the most difficult concept to work through from setting criteria, because difficulty will always be dependent on the dog. And I'll use a fearful dog, for example. Some dogs may find a large truck very, very scary. Some dogs may have zero issue dealing with traffic, but may find dogs really, really scary. And so that's where we have to recognize the differences and unique learning histories of each individual dog to understand, hey, what is hard for you and what is not. Um, you know, I'll use again reactivity. For some dogs, I find, obviously calm dogs who don't make a lot of eye contact are a lot easier to train around than that dog who's making a lot of eye contact, jumping and screaming at you. Some dogs will do easy with big dogs. Some people will do easy with small dogs. That's where the unique situation for each dog has to pop up. So as you are troubleshooting your criteria, you need to ask yourself kind of, hey, how are we building? So the two terms to think about here, one is lumping. And that's where you're increasing, say, multiple criteria, jumping from, say, 5 to 10 seconds, or adding time and distance together. Um, and that's very, very reasonable thing to do, but recognizing that you did it will help you manage criteria going forward. Because if it worked, great, that's a successful step. If it didn't, you have to recognize you did too much, and that's where you look at splitting, which is say, hey, criteria A worked, criteria B didn't, so I need to find the middle ground between those criteria. All right, fading the lure. So one of the most common things that always pops up with folks, especially with rewards, is, well, how do we get the reward out of the dog's face, right? Because we don't want them only doing it because they can see that the reward is present. We want them to do the behavior because the behavior is rewarding, and then we can bring those rewards to them. So a common way to do that is to work it in stages. So very first thing I'll do when I'm working with rewards is, if I have my reward in my right hand or my lure in my right hand, I'll get the behavior done, and then I'll reward from my opposite hand. And then I'll fade the food from my reward hand, but still have it visible in the opposite hand. And then I'll get the full hand signal with empty hands, reach my reward, reward is delivered, and eventually I'll hide the reward altogether. So I might swing my treat pouch around behind me so that there's no food in front of me, no food visible to the dog. I'll give the hand signal, I'll wait for the behavior, and I'll grab the food from the invisible location to reward them. Um, then just to let everybody kind of know, where even if the reward is gone, you've got a nice hand signal. If you want to get to a verbal cue, that is normally done after we get the behavior on a reliable physical cue. And we do that through chaining the physical cue and the verbal cue together. And it is important that you do this linearly and not together. So we give the verbal cue, a very short pause, physical cue, mark and reward. It's very common for folks to accidentally say give a sit hand signal at the exact same time as the verbal cue. So they'll go sit. Well, when dogs are going to hear two different cues, they're much more likely to cue in on your physical prompt than your verbal one. So you'll find that you might struggle to get to that verbal cue in that instance. So you want it to look more like this, which is sit, hand signal, mark and reward. Um, Over time, you increase the length of the pause between the verbal and physical cue to give the dog the opportunity to kind of anticipate what's coming. And of course, when they do, they now respond to the verbal cue, and we can reward for that. And we now start to have the dog performing our cues through the verbal command. All right, let's take a look at some examples here of how we can work at what shaping looks like. So the very first thing here is engagement. And you'll notice that I'm just going to be stationary for this video. Anytime the dog offers some attention, I'm going to provide some food. It's not important the dog always takes it, but I'm going to offer it anyways. Good
I can't see
girl.
the video, Dan. Is it popping up on yours?
I will fix that. Didn't
Okay.
realize that it wasn't all sharing. There we go.
There we
Should be
go.
up now? Yeah.
Yep.
We'll start that over. So nervous dog here to start with. You'll notice that I'm just going to, anytime I get attention, I'm going to try to deliver some food. If he wants it, great. If he doesn't, that's okay. Not going to put pressure on him to have to engage with me. As the other dogs pop in, you'll see a variety of different skills I'm using to engage. A lot of it is treat combinations of treat tossing and hand delivers, along with some prompts to cue back to me, right? Some of the kissy noises, some of the calls. That way we're practicing that, hey, come see me, go away. Nice catch. Ready? Catch. Nice catch. Ready? Catch. Nice catch. One more time. Ready? Catch. Nice catch. Go find it. Good job. Ready? Go find it. Good girl. You ready? You can see the different levels of enthusiasm the dogs show. That the more enthusiasm, the more engaged they are in this process. All right, take a look at some successful approximation. You'll see here as I lure, I'm going to reward once for halfway around, once for all the way around. Yes. Oh, that's a big body. He did just about knock me over. Here I'm working on a rollover. So you'll notice I'm going to reward for find the positions comfortable. Reward for one hip, here we go. Reward for a shoulder, and reward for all the way over. Good girl. Oh yeah, catch. Yeah, catch. And here, a little bit of confidence building activities using a small treat trail, just to show a dog working through an obstacle, in this case, my legs. All right, so common behavior I work with a lot of folks on is teaching place. And so here you'll see a handful of stages I use to help teach place to this dog named Harley. Going to start by just trying to get one or two paws somewhere on that bed. So I'm going to work to get the sit. Nice here part is he offers the sit, so I'll have to get it, but then I'll add in the down. And then, I'll reset and then try the behavior again. Yes. Free. Yes. Free. Notice I'm not using any verbal cues for either sit or down. Because this is place, I want it to be go to bed and lay down. I'm just using hand signals. Yes. I'm marking the instant that I get the down on the mat. Free. Harlem. Yes.
Dan, do you want to touch on the fact that you're giving a release cue?
Yes, and I did miss that on the screen. With any stationary behavior, it's always good if you cue it to start, we want to cue it to finish. And so you're going to hear me say free to let Harley know that the rep is finished and that we're going to start over. Yes. Let's skip ahead here a little bit. Harley, please. And after building through that practice, and he knows that you can see who's automatically giving that down, I add in the verbal cue to help us get to that final stage. Ready? Three. Rolling, please. Yes. Three. Rolling, middle. Rolling, middle. Yes. It is always good when you're working on training activities to take breaks, have some fun, even incorporate other activities into it. So that way it's not just a repetitive activity for your dog. So I'm going to go just one more time here for you on the very last rep there. Notice here that when I say place, he doesn't go. So I then add in the hand signal to reinforce that was the request. But he hadn't quite put together the word was the entire prompt at this stage. So this is an interesting one. If anyone's familiar, this dog's name is Zorro. And at one point he had a real difficult time going back in this kennel. So as you watch this video, just take note of where the reward placement is, and how I'm slowly moving his head farther and farther into the kennel to encourage him to move in on his own. Relatively high rate of reinforcement. I'm not asking for any duration at this stage. I'm just looking for entry and exit, entry and exit. I really want to make the process of going into the kennel as fun as possible.
I just want to quickly say this is like relevant to the shelter, but this could also work for crate training.
Yep. Yes. And this is just an example. And obviously, you need motivation with the toy, but you can see that it doesn't necessarily have to be food. Yes. So the very next stage I build up to is just a small pause before exiting the kennel. We're still not shutting the door because I don't want him to feel like we're rushing in there. The goals are getting put away. We're teaching just the behavior of relaxing while going in and out of that door. You notice the first day much shorter. As I built up, I was able to get all the way across the yard and back. And that one's a good example right there, right? Mistakes happen. Dogs break. I asked for too much. Notice there was no punishment. There was no negative connotation. Just reset, recognized that was too long, did a shorter rep. I do like that reminder for a lot of folks when you're working on any behavior. Momentum is your friend, whether or not that's movement, that's kennel, that's walking, anything. If you can get the dog moving in that direction without feeling that tension or pressure, you can take advantage of that to achieve that behavior. So I will highlight here the one thing with using toys as a reward, you do have to have a reliable method to both have the dog retrieve the toy and to get the toy back from them. So the drop it's, the stays, the leave it's, the take it cues, can be very important when learning to play or train with a toy. A little bit of added difficulty with the juggling and the bouncing, and one final release. All right, the very last video I wanted to go through here is actually a cat video.
I just created a $47 ebook in 3 minutes.
Don't care, eBay. All right.
This is Asia. She's 9 months old. She's going to help us.
So before I play this video, the idea behind this, and this would be similar to doing some handling for a dog, but I actually am showing this video for a handful of reasons. I'll highlight them as I go, but there's a handful of kind of don't do's here, and I'll highlight that as we go forward. Areas where we could probably, there's too much force being used, too much pressure being used, and how we're not necessarily reading body language ideally through this video.
Great. Beginning stages of shaping a handling behavior.
So you notice the ducking and moving away as we start here, right? So before we move on any farther, we'd want to work on engagement there, right? Because the hand there clearly was not received as a positive thing, which is why we got so much avoidance. And so that would be our starting point. We wouldn't want to just force our way forward from this standpoint.
You can see she's skittish to having the top of her head pet. She's had this since we got her. And while we've solved quite a few other issues, this is one I've never really tackled. So let's start. First, I'm going to find where her threshold is.
And so I will highlight right there. Did you notice how she repositioned the cat on the table? Instead of using food or using a targeting behavior, say like a touch cue, she's likely doing herself a disservice by manually adjusting the position of the cat. If we have handling sensitivities, that kind of force can create a little bit of a conflicted response to the hand going forward, even if it's not, even if the sensitivity is to the head, that could generalize it to other areas.
This. At what point on her back does she start getting skittish, and where is it still positive? Next, I'm using a motivator, which in this case is part of breakfast, raw chicken. I've also withheld breakfast. So
notice the missed head
motivation is
duck on the
45
on the
right
reach that she got too close. Another adjustment through
now.
physical manipulation.
To mark that she has done the right behavior. I'm not using it as a lure. I'm not using it as a distraction.
And I'll even notice they'll highlight there for you if I go back just a second. See the way the head is turning to focus on the hand as she's reaching the pet, even though she's not going on the head. That head shift and that look, it tells you that, hey, we're probably pushing too far. We need to find an easier approximation if we're looking to build a positive association with handling for this animal.
That she has done the right behavior. I'm not using it as a lure. I'm not using it as a distraction. I'm purely using it as, yes, you did what I wanted. Here's the reward. Another technique I'm using is a marker word.
A little bit of cowering,
In
a little
this
bit
case, I'm
moving
using
away.
good. You can use yes. You could even use a clicker. What I'm doing is I'm saying, yes, at that moment, good. You did exactly what I want. And I followed up with a treat. There's a delay between the behavior and the treat. So this helps communicate to the animal exactly at the moment that they did the behavior you wanted. Unfortunately, Bayou here had his breakfast withheld as well. He is normally pretty good at sitting and staying and being patient while we work with the second cat, but he's a little ornery this morning.
Notice some of the avoidance behaviors.
So again, I just keep working it. When she has a positive reaction, I follow it up with a reward.
All right, and I'll stop that right there, and then we'll do one more that's just a little bit more fun.
why we train sea lions. So we do it for three main reasons. The big reasons are
So one of the things to
it helps us take
I just like to remind everybody, because a lot of people will think about some of the learning theory and training opinions as being very dog specific, but as you can see, it works on cats, and it's really the primary tool used in most zoos nowadays to work with a variety of their animals to get them to do a variety of fun and kind of cute little tricks.
sea lions. We do it for enrichment, and we also do it for education. We can actually talk to the public about our sea lions. Like I said, one of the most important ones being husbandry. It allows us to do things like check out their teeth, allows us to do stuff like brush their teeth to maintain good dental health. We can also look at various parts of their body in order to make sure that everything is okay. Over. Good. Our sea lions here are actually trained to participate in vaccinations. So we will have them present to us and we can actually give them a vaccine. We usually give it right about here. Good. They are also trained for blood draws. Yeah. Where we will actually put them in this position and draw blood from in between their toes on their back flippers. Good. They can also participate in their own respiratory and cardio health, as far as we can have them blow so we can listen to their lungs. If we think that they have any sort of sinus infection or anything like that, we can have them also do that blowing, and we can do it onto a petri dish and see what sort of bacteria might be growing. Is that right? Yeah. We can also have them breathe into an anesthesia cone and participate in their own anesthetic procedures. The other reasons that we train, like I said, one is for enrichment. So training for these sea lions can be fun and engaging for them. It can also help them practice things that they would normally do in the wild. One of the things that they will do in the wild is a behavior called jugging, where they will actually lift a flipper out of the water while they're swimming and use that to help either cool or heat their bodies. Natural behaviors like scratching, we can practice. Good. Good. Another reason, like I said, is for educational purposes. It lets us teach the public about sea lions.
All right, we'll stop the videos there. Last couple slides, then we'll take some questions. So typically in a home, we have time, resources, and a lot more bandwidth. So I always like to just kind of highlight for how working in a shelter kind of changes how this process can go. So some of the constraints, if we're trying to do some shaping or training in a shelter, it can be difficult to establish safety and security with those dogs. It's a tough environment. There's a lot of stress, and it can be difficult to spend the time, sometimes within a day, within weeks or months, to build up enough safety and trust to engage in some of those training. Their needs are almost never met. So there's always a lot of energy, distractions, and outlets that are going to be very motivating and reinforcing for those dogs besides training. There's also environmental limitations, right? Most of the time we're stuck we have limitations within, say, wings of shelters, within the yard space that we can use, within how busy or calm our training environment will be. It's also difficult to find both continuity and consistency between staff and volunteers. Everybody using the same cues, physical and verbal cues, the same terminology. It's hard to track progress and track sessions across multiple people, multiple days, multiple weeks when we're working in a shelter setting. It doesn't mean we shouldn't train. It just means it's harder. And that getting to the behavior not being the goal is okay, because training is enrichment. It provides mental, physical, and social outlets for the animals that we work with. It impacts not only their behavior, but it impacts their optimism. You might not be able to teach that dog to sit, but you might have just spent a half an hour, 45 minutes teaching that dog how fun it was to interact with people. They're gonna be much more willing to interact with other people. It'll make them more optimistic about their meet and greets, and then ultimately that makes them more placeable. If you are able to teach some basic behaviors or build some engagement, it also starts to lay the foundation for any foster adopters who end up with that dog. As you work with them, you'll find you gain information about their personality and their preferences, whether or not they're a rope or ball dog, if they like to shred, if they prefer chicken or beef or fruits or veggies, whether or not they have a lot of focus, very little focus, a lot of energy, very little energy. Some of that stuff will pop out, and that provides a lot of information that can help market them. And then last but not least, working with the dogs using positive reinforcement tends to create dogs who are enjoying the process, which tends to make for better pictures and videos to support placement. So it's not about the final behavior, it's about the process, because the process is what leads to the healthy and happy animals. All right, I think now it's a great opportunity to open it up to questions.
Suppose I have to unmute a question, right?
Yes.
There we go. Yes. Um, Renly just wanted a treat there, Dan.
I believe it.
What about specific to heat, since the temperatures are going up? What are some instant cues to recognize that your dog is starting to have some heat stress?
I Obviously, the extreme signals will be avoidance of hot surfaces. You might find that they're moving faster, picking paws up, kind of tap dancing a little bit, a little restless. Some of the less straightforward cues will be they'll stop taking food when they get hot. It's very normal. They might also find that you might also find, hey, they're just a little bit more easily distracted. They might do some displacement behaviors, such as if they've been paying attention for the last 10, 15 minutes, you'll find all of a sudden they just have a need to go smell or mark or dig, or they might even pull you home. I've had a handful of dogs so like, I know home's over there, but it's time to go do that, right? Um, and I will say one of the easiest things to mitigate heat is actually water. So it's very common, especially here in Arizona for most of the year, to not really think about how hot it is and not bring water out while we're out training or walking. But you can find that even just water breaks every 10 or 5, 10, 15 minutes, depending on the dog, can actually significantly increase how long they're willing to stay engaged, willing to work, and willing to take food when we're training with them.
Good question, though,
That was.
especially since we're in Arizona and it
Well,
is starting to drop here.
Sorry.
Anybody else have any questions?
I don't have any questions, but I love that you incorporated the cat and the other animals, Dan. That was a good one this time around. The cat one I loved a lot.
The sea lion made my heart happy.
Yeah, I loved it. Yeah, the cat broadens it a little bit. I tell you, I used to love to working with the cats, so I like that you brought that in too.
Whenever I need a smile, I just Google videos of zoo trainers because it's just hilarious watching them do stuff with walruses, giraffes, seals, otters, dolphins. One of my favorite stats is apparently giraffes are very sensitive to anesthesia. And so they've actually captive giraffe lifespans have actually extended years through cooperative care because they no longer have to use anesthetics because anesthetics carry a very high risk of death for the giraffes. And so the cooperative care shaping process, the programs actually allowed them to do a vast number of procedures without anesthesia. And so it's significantly prolonged the life of giraffes in captive zoos.
That's so cool, dude.
You want to quickly explain what cooperative care means when you say cooperative care?
Yes. Cooperative care, generally speaking, refers to basically hoof care, teeth care, coat care, and others kind of bathing or maintenance activities, right? And so for a dog specifically, it would be brushing and grooming the coat. It would be trimming nails. It would be bath time. And for folks to really take the next step, it would be things along the lines of teaching voluntary eye drops for brushing teeth, for checking gums, and then even potentially support for veterinary care, such as head holds for jugular blood draws, for shots, for things along those lines, so the dogs have some structure and expectation to take away some of the fear and anxiety of those medical procedures.
Good stuff. Thank you.
Yeah.
I want to make sure everybody like knows what we're talking about when we say certain things. Um, well, I mean, we still have a few minutes left if anybody else has any questions, comments.
No.
So for new adopters, what shaping training behaviors would you suggest?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah,
That's
we
okay.
got the gist of you. So that a lot of that again will depend on the dog. The very first thing that I'm always shaping with any new dog in my house is my routine. So I'm typically working on crate training, house
Sorry.
training, and engagement, or per the three places where I typically start, right? Obviously house training, pretty straightforward, but new dogs, new environment, a lot of that's usually pretty scary. So I spend a lot of time rewarding for eye contact, for check-ins, for engaging with me, for spending time with me. And I also like that also doubles to keep them from pacing. It helps them settle and feel safe. From there, I'll move on to some working just some basic obedience behaviors. I'll work on some sits, some downs. I'm probably working on a place cue. And then I'm adding my second safety behavior, which is door manners. I really like having my dogs not want to bolt anytime a door opens. I really don't ever want to lose one. So I'll work a nice sit stay, practice opening and closing front doors. So that way, when the door does open, it doesn't mean the dog thinks, hey, yep, it's time to head out. And then from there, it always depends on the dog. A lot of dogs come into my house. We're then working on loose leash walking and probably some dog-dog reactivity, where I'm using short duration activities to build loose leash walking, and then typically a combination of distance and difficulty to work on dog-dog exposures.
Good question.
Clients, yeah. That one's always fun. Yeah,
That's a really good question.
yeah, I love that. That one can be tricky. That one always again will honestly follows fairly similar processes, right? To where as a trainer, it's my job to take a look at a client's skill set and then break a behavior down into things that they can enjoy and can be successful doing. So, very first thing I do with that one is pretty typically work on actually the mechanics behind delivering treats. It is very common for that feels like it should be really simple. But when you throw some treats in a treat pouch, the idea of quickly getting into it, getting into the dog's face and delivering it is quite difficult. So I do a lot of physically practicing reward different types of reward delivery, which would be something along the lines of, can I hand it to him? Awesome. Yeah, cool. Can I toss it? So then catch it. Cool. Can I toss the treat in front of them, behind them, to the side of them? So I have some accuracy for when I need to move the dog. Can we still get the reward done, but move them in appropriate directions? Next step is usually leash handling. That's the second place where a lot of folks aren't usually really thinking about how they're handling the leash. And so we talk a lot about how to use two hands to maintain secure connection without creating tension in the leash, right? So one hand controls the leash, one hand controls the length of the leash, and using that to make sure that we're when we do communicate with our dogs, if they do pull, that we're actively saying, hey, look, I need you to move back towards me. We're not proactively yanking on the leash, moving with tension, trying to ask them to walk on a 6-inch leash for way too long because it's just so much is going on there. So that is typically our starting point. And then from there, it all depends on kind of what we want to work on there. We always start simple and build some foundation behaviors in first. And then we typically address the behaviors the client is working for, right? Because there is an art to reading your dog's body language, to interacting with your dog, to engaging in activities. So, place is a very common one because it can be done pretty easily and simply for most folks in their house, to where you have to work on. I love place for this a lot because it gives clients a great opportunity to think about building distance, building duration, building distance, and intentionally building difficulty on a behavior. So that way, when we do go out and about and look at the real world, there's already some comprehension and some thought process to understanding those variables before having to go actively assess a random situation at a park and looking at dog's body language. And that way, there's some skill sets built up there before we go address much bigger, more complicated environments.
Great question.
Yeah.
Great question.
Very good question.
We can use the last couple minutes to do some housekeeping, but feel free if anybody else has a question while I'm doing this, feel free to go ahead and pop that in the chat. I do want to reference that the Sign Up Genius still has classes from last year's summer school on there that are not going to be happening this year. But if you want to watch any of those summer school classes from last year, we do have the videos available on our linked tree, which you can find on our Instagram or on our website. You should be able to go through the summer school, like to the summer school links for the YouTube channel, if you wanted to look up any of those old presentations. We do have some presentations that have yet to be announced. It's been a slow rollout this year, but we do have some exciting stuff. We're going to have a couple of presenters that have presented with us before come back. Lisa Gunter and Rachel Gilchrist are going to come back and talk to us about some of their really cool innovations in fostering. And some of the cool stuff they're working on in research for that kind of stuff. I think we're also trying to get a family. We're trying to do right, Dan?
Yep.
So
we have
some things
we
to
have a family, kids and dogs presentation planned for August.
Perfect. Yes. So just keep an eye out for any of the new classes that are coming up. Again, if you want to look up any of the previous classes that were from last year, you can go on the link tree or our website. And I mean, thank you so much, Dan. This was an excellent presentation. I know it can be like a lot of like terminology and stuff at first, but it really does help like when making sure that everybody's on the same page. So I appreciate you breaking that down in such a like easy, great way. So yay for Dan. Thank you, Dan. We appreciate you. And
It looks like
thank
you
you
got
to
one more.
everybody.
We might have one more question down there.
Yep.
Oh, sorry.
I have not had a chance to actively train staff on cooperative care in the shelter setting. I have had some rare instance where some folks have asked where I've been asked to help do some cooperative care for specific dogs in those settings. Sometimes it's dogs in foster still under rescue. Sometimes it's a couple dogs that's been actively in shelter, primarily on either nail trims, muzzle training, or eye drops.
Good question.
That was a good question. Yeah.
Lots of good questions
Possible.
this time around. Thanks
Yeah.
so much for asking questions, guys. Love that. Okay. Well, we are going to wrap up. So thank you, Dan, and thank you to everyone who spent a little bit of time with us on a Thursday at 5:30 after work. I know you guys have plenty of things to spend your time doing, so thank you for spending a little time with us. We
It's very
appreciate you,
appreciated.
and stay tuned. More to come. I'm going to stop the recording now because it's
Yep. Appreciate everyone for chiming in. And if